Hey everybody, it's your buddy Pete, the Break It Down show's executive producer and host. I changed it up a little bit. Hey, so a couple things real quick. I got some announcements to do. Let's just do them up front. Scott Husing and I are going to ride across the nation all the way to South Carolina starting on Monday the 13th. If you want to track us and follow us, just follow us probably on Instagram. It's probably the best place. We'll be updating things there and directing you towards things. If you want to support the ride, and we are raising money for the prevention of veteran suicide. And we're going actually on this trip because Scott's dear friend, Dan White, gave it up and he lost the battle with life. And so we're trying to do our best to continue to keep awareness on veteran suicide. You know, in this time of COVID, I got to be honest, for me, I was talking to my therapist earlier today, trying to keep my head on straight because it is not easy. It's easy to get depressed and anxious and lose sight of what's important. Now, look, I'm fine. I'm able to manage it. But when I liken it to something, you know, my own suicidal ideation, it's like, I know I'm going to burn my hand every day. That's the suicidal ideation. I know I'm going to do that. So even the impending sense of this mood that's going to hit me at some point, it just becomes an unbearable weight. And I can identify why people would say, I want to do something besides this. So if you're looking for an understanding of what veteran suicide is like, again, I am not in danger, but the next guy might be. And this is who we're looking for. The people that don't have the tools that I've been given through the VA to help me keep my stuff under control. I'm barely still here. And let me tell you, it's not fun. And we really could use your help. So savethebrave.org, help support the ride. And we'll do it in honor of Dan White. Okay, one other big announcement, because next week's going to be a busy week. While we're driving across the nation, I'm still going to be publishing shows. And The Prison Chronicles will debut on the 15th. I don't know how many episodes I'll get out because I will be on the road, but won't be a whole lot of sleep between now and the 20th of July as I start to get all this work done and get everything cranked out. So what I want you to do for me is, and this is what I'm really asking this, savethebrave.org and then Prison Chronicles. Both of those things need your shares, need your attention. Now, the Prison Chronicle thing, anybody you can put it in front of, you want to tag someone on Twitter or on Facebook who might be interested in it, that's how you're going to help that stuff break out, and it's going to be fantastic. Okay, all of that aside, let me tell you who our incredible guest is. And it's easy, and I put the announcements first because it's Greg Proops. And if you didn't hear the live version, and keep in mind, we do live versions on almost every single episode, so you can always go to the YouTube channel for John or myself, and you can see those. But if you didn't already watch the Greg Proops episode, well, here you go. Here is the Greg Proops episode when we talk about all kinds of things. And you know how much we love Greg and what a great talent he is. So here comes the incredible mind of Greg Proops.
Lions Rock Productions.
This is Jay Moore.
This is Greg Proops.
This is Jordan Harbinger.
This is Dexter from The Offspring.
This is Nathan
This is
East.
Sebastian Younger.
This is Rick Marotta.
This is Stuart Copeland.
This is Mic Gillette.
This is Andy Summers.
Hey, this is Skunk Baxter.
This is Gabby Reese.
This is Rob Bell.
Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero.
Hey, and this is Pete A. Turner.
Hey, y'all, it's Greg Proops, and you're digging the Break It Down Show.
And now, the Break It Down Show with John Leon Guerrero and Pete A. Turner.
Yes, indeed. Greg Proops is a comedian, an actor, a philosopher, I say, well known for his work in improvisational comedy. Of course, you've seen him on Whose Line Is It Anyway? And if you're in your early 20s, you probably know him as Bob the Builder. Now, Pete and I and all of our friends growing up in the Bay Area, we know him, or we got to know him, became aware of him on the Alex Bennett Show. And so we've been with you ever since, Greg. And he's the host of the amazing weekly podcast, The Smartest Man in the World, on which he espouses his copious knowledge of music, mostly music, movies, baseball, misconstrued history, comedy, arts in general. It's great. You will love it if you don't already. Greg, welcome back. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, brothers. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Are you joining us from the salubrious confines of the Porpoise of Fruititude?
I am. As you can see, the porpoise is full of lively art.
Lively art indeed. We have boring backgrounds, comparatively speaking, but
Tiny elephants.
Oh, yeah, look at that.
Yeah. Wow.
It's from India.
Yeah.
Also, the trinkets that he's gathered along his travels, which are
That's true.
Are great and far. I really wanted to thank you for the glorious and deserved tributes that you gave to Little Richard and to Betty Wright.
That's very nice of you. Betty Wright was, by all accounts, not just a great singing star, but she was a mentor to lots of people and beloved in the music business.
Yeah.
And they put her on TV a few years ago, which was great. I don't watch those shows, but I'm glad she got a gig on one. And Little Richard, my wife and I have been talking about it for weeks. We were thinking of even doing another tribute. The last 2 weeks we've played him and talked about him. We kind of parceled his career out over 2 shows, but watching him again, it's like his greatness can't be overstated. You know what I mean?
That's true.
He's so influential. And he had Otis Redding at different times, Otis Redding, Jimi Hendrix, and Billy Preston in his band, as well as helping start James Brown and the Beatles and the Stones, who all opened for him. Yeah. And on top of which, he used to open for Sister Rosetta Tharpe, who's one of the Black women who invented rock.
Right. And a monster guitar player.
Yeah.
Oh my God, she's fantastic. So his place in history is just, not to mention what everybody thought of, well, when I was a teenager in the 70s, of a rock star, which was Mick Jagger, Lou Reed, David Bowie, Tina Turner, kind of fierce, pansexual, lots of makeup and that whole glam rock movement of the early 70s with Mark Bolan and Suzi Quatro and everybody. It's so Little Richard. I mean, there's just, he did it. He was copying a drag queen that he knew, and evidently Macon was full of that scene then, which is really exciting when you think about it. Because we were just watching Here We Are last night on HBO, which is all the guys from RuPaul's Drag Race. They go from town to town and kind of liberate these towns and get people to get up and wear drag and stuff. And I think Little Richard really is all that freedom that people enjoy now, if they, obviously times are bloody awful, but the idea of being a gender bending star kind of starts with him because he made it popular. Yeah. And he sold the records. Yeah. And like he said, the white kids would have Pat Boone on the shelf so that their parents didn't get mad, and then they'd play him.
Yes.
And we're from the Bay Area, so
you mentioned somebody else that I'd love to hear your thoughts on, because when you stack up like the legends of female rock and everything, you said Suzi Quatro, and people don't realize that lady has sold 60 million albums. 60
Suzi Quatro
million.
Was huge.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if you're a TV fan, you remember her from, I think she played Leather Toscadero on Happy Days or something.
Yep.
She was an enormous rock star in England.
Right.
And you were talking about Bob the Builder. We did this Bob the Builder movie years ago, and I can't remember the name. It was like Bob Goes West or something. And she played the cowgirl in it. And I wasn't in the studio with her, sadly. It was one of the few times I was in LA and she was wherever she was, but it was her voice as this, she kind of talks like this, and I was thrilled to even be in a thing that had Suzi Quatro in it.
When you look at, like, if you were to unfairly rank like Debbie Harry, Joan Jett, Suzi Quatro, it gets really hard to sort those ladies out. I mean, some of them are in the Hall of Fame, some are not, but I don't think that Joan Jett's sold more albums than Suzi Quatro has, but she doesn't have that name recognition.
I don't know. I know. I love Joan Jett. Years ago, Colin Mockery said that he went to see Rocky Horror on Broadway and that she played Magenta. And I was like, that's a really good call. Yeah. Right. Because then she could, and I said, well, how was she? And he went, when she was singing, she was great. Deborah Harry, I've had occasion to, is an acquaintance of mine over the years. When I used to play Caroline's in New York, she'd come see me. And then we ended up doing a bunch of ACLU benefits together. And then we went to see her several years ago at the Hollywood Bowl with Blondie and got to have a drink with her afterward. And she is the nicest, funniest, most engaging person. She's so charming and so beautiful. And I read her book this year, and she writes me back sometimes. She's really funny. I mean, she's sassy as can be. We were at this event once, and her phone went off, and I swear to God, the phone rang, and it went, "Call me."
What?
And she picks up her phone, and she turns to me and my wife and goes, "It's my sister calling." And she knows that I'm tired of hearing that song because we've been on tour. And I fell over laughing. Yeah. Her ringtone was "Call Me."
Wow.
Yeah.
I saw her on this recent tour. She was fantastic. She was out playing with Elvis Costello, And, it's two folks not like in their youthful prime, but putting on hell of a show every time they go on stage.
Yeah, there's a bill.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw Elvis a million times in the 70s and 80s. And I was quite a fan then. I've kind of not as big a fan now just because I don't really listen to him that much anymore. Blondie I saw a bunch of times. Me and my cousin Donnie worshipped her. And we saw the Ramones open for Blondie in Santa Cruz in like 78. And so cut to about 10 years ago. So it would be 2008, around there. We were playing the Santa Cruz Civic with the improv group I'm in with Ryan Stiles. And I said, I saw Blondie and the Ramones here when I was a teenager. It was 40 years at least.
Yeah.
78, right? So I say to the stage manager, who's a woman backstage, I say, I saw Blondie and the Ramones here in 1978. And she goes, and this is what I love about Santa Cruz. That was a good show.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. That's terrific. We put on Facebook that we were going to have you on, and a friend of mine said, oh yeah, I can't remember what he said, but he started a conversation about how you were going to be like a whirling dervish and watch out. And we said, yeah, we know. The last time we had you on, we started the conversation with, hey, Greg, you're from San Carlos, California. What was the last show you saw at the Circle Star? And then the next thing I said was, all right, well, our guest today has been Greg Proops.
The Circle Star. Yeah, that was a good place. And my cousin Donnie and I also saw Cheech and Chong with Tower of Power. It's a Cheech and Chong program.
Wow.
And they did it at Second City style, 2 folding chairs on stage. Uh-huh. And Tommy came up and pretended to clean off a lowrider, right? Then he pretends to get in and drive, and Chong walks on stage and goes, hey, and
right.
He stops, picks him up, and Cheech, not Tommy. Tommy gets in with Cheech, and then he goes, got any weed? And the next 10 minutes was Tommy going, these are all 70s types of weed. I've got mesh, I've got tie stick, I've got red, I've got lumbo, I've got gold,
Acapulco Gold,
yeah,
Maui Wowie.
Yeah, those are all the strains then, right? Because now it's, Kush and strawberry vape and chocolate chip cookies and all that jazz. But in those days, it was all regional specific.
Yeah.
And then we brought weed with us and we smoked it indoors. No one gave a shit at that show. This was San Carlos, which is pretty square. Because when Tower Power came on, they had Lenny Pickett then.
Yeah.
He was the crazy white saxophonist.
LP, Lenny Pickett.
It's LP. And he had this giant afro that he shook around. And he had this insane dance that he did the whole time. And then he would take a gigantic solo in the middle of, whatever the Knock Yourself Out.
Yeah.
And then, like you said, the whole band, because it's CT,
right.
just Tom. Everybody took a little.
Yeah, we had
still
Mic Gillette on the show. Yeah, absolutely. Still a band, still going strong. Yeah. I saw him in January. I think, Pete was there. I don't know how much of the show he saw. But we had Mic Gillette on the show just before he passed. We actually did Mic Gillette's last interview, and we loved very dearly Mic Gillette. And he was telling us that when they found Lenny at the time was homeless.
Yeah.
And he was busking, and Mick said, look at this guy. And they were all like, oh yeah, that's, they knew his reputation, and they were like, we should pull him in. And so they just dragged him in to the club and put him on, and he murdered. And they were like, dude, you got to join the band. And now, he's now the longest running musical director that Saturday Night Live's ever had.
Right. Lenny Pickett.
Yeah.
He's been there 100 years.
Yeah.
I did not know that. I did not know that he was a homeless dude. I mean, he left the band after what? For a couple albums? He was only on. Was he there for 5-7 years?
Nah. Yeah, I don't know how many years it was, but it was just a few years.
I remember seeing him then, and then he wasn't with them the next time I saw them. And every time I saw them, they had a different lead singer.
Yeah.
Literally every time I saw them. I think they had 8 different
I think we've had 15 lead singers from Tower Power on our show.
Right.
When Mic Gillette passed, because Tower Power is so near and dear to me, it's really cool that you got to interview him. I played the exact part of You're Still a Young Man.
Yeah.
And Diamond Sparkling, his solo, so that I could go, this is what Mic Gillette sounded like. Because I saw them, I think, 9 times when I was a kid.
Yeah, that flugelhorn solo in Sparkling in the Sand was my dad was a sax player. So I grew up on, Chicago
Really?
and TOP and stuff. And I actually studied with Dave Garibaldi for a while. So
How exciting.
it really, and grew up in Vallejo. So we have always just Tower of Power has just been part of the musical fabric. It's the thing against which I compare practically everything else. Would this stand up to the Tower standard? And they're still going strong.
Funny. Yeah, it's funny. Yeah, I've been in touch with them on Twitter because I see the new album out, and then they like tweeted me back and stuff. It's funny to me because there's people who lived on the other coast who didn't get as much Tower of Power as we did.
Right.
It's hard for people to understand what a gigantic part of the Bay Area music scene they were, and how they were like at one point probably the biggest funk band in America. Maybe around Bump City.
Yeah, 74-ish. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I did a gig once with Rick Stevens, God rest his soul.
God rest his soul.
He had that terrible drug deal that went down, and he aced a couple guys. And then they put him in San Quentin, and he became a minister.
He
and
had a
then
life sentence.
Or actually, out.
Death sentence. And then Jerry Brown commuted the death penalty. All the death penalty cases. So his death sentence turned into a life sentence that turned into his ministry work and all that stuff. We were going to have him on the show, and just we're working on booking it, and then he passed.
As merciful as God can be, he was let out, and he did not die in prison. He was out and still working his ministry.
Yep.
And a friend of mine's dad owned a nightclub in San Mateo in the 70s called Groucho's. That was sort of across the tracks. And I was a dishwasher at the club a couple of times. And Rick Stevens had a band after he left Tower of Power called Brass Horizons, which surprisingly sounded quite a lot like Tower of Power. And I was pressed into service from the kitchen because they didn't have anyone to run the lights. So I was probably 15. I was forced into the light booth, which was 2 or 3 switches like this. And like a fader. That was it. There wasn't it was a disco. So basically they had a band playing.
Right.
And so I worked the lights for them. And after the set, Rick Steves came in and you'll remember this, gave me 10.
Yeah.
We didn't high five in those days because it was too early for high fives.
Yeah.
He slapped you some skin.
Yet.
Yeah.
He gave me skin like that. And he went, your lights were fantastic. And I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing.
I'm doing 3 switches.
Green, blue, red. And I remember when they closed the set, they played that classic, because it's the last call for alcohol, y'all.
Yeah.
He was a good singer. You're still a young man, right?
Yeah, he originally sang that was Lenny Williams.
It's not Lenny. It's Lenny, because Lenny goes down to the nightclub, right? Or do I
think it's the other way around.
That's right.
Yeah.
You're right.
They're
both awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. So we were working on booking Rick Stevens, and he said last time I talked to him on the phone, he said, well, I got a show coming up. I'm going to actually, Cold Blood is playing, but they're going to bring me up, and I'm going to do half of the set with Cold Blood. So
really?
Yeah. So I went and I saw that show. That was the last show he did. And he was fantastic. Just had held up and was looking great and sounding great and just really strong, nailing everything. And Lydia Pence from Cold Blood, sang a couple of duets with him, and they were just as powerful as ever. And it was so good to see that.
Your stories are awesome. That is just fantastic. It's really, really amazing. Again, another people, East Coasters, Cold Blood was a major funk outfit. We had Grand Central Station, we had Frankie Beverly, we had Cold Blood, Tower of Power. Yeah. War was from San Jose, and they're still a band as far as
Sly and the Family Stone. We just had Greg Errico from Sly and the Family Stone on last week.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And he's holding up great. He looks fantastic, man. I really just have such fondness for him. And then to see him, when he came on the show, just like you did, the screen comes up and he appears, and I was like, Greg, you look terrific. He's just been taking great care of himself. And it was, it's just really nice to see because we're
I
all
love your bookings.
not getting younger.
Thanks, man.
No,
Yeah. So thank you. You're in good company.
no kidding, man. I think last week someone said online, who's the greatest band? Michael McKean's ever put it out. And I said that Sly and the Family Stone is the greatest American band. And, the great American rock band is Aerosmith. And of course, everybody jumps up your ass the minute you say something like that.
Yeah.
But that's the fun of the fun of the pandemic, is that we're all sitting around thinking of our favorite music.
I was in that
Yes.
thread with you, and we were
Debating
talking
it.
about it. Yeah, because
Yeah.
Sly Stone was copied by the icons who were copied by the icons who copied the icons. He is the spark.
All the way down to Drake.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
There is no modern music without Sly Stone. He's all over it. And the whole band is incredible. And the idea, like he said, I purposely went out and grabbed these different people, hippies and everything. I wanted to bring this collection of people together because that's what he was about. And we could all still learn some lessons from that.
Right?
Yep.
It's a polyracial, multisexual, rock funk outfit that sang about racism and positivity
Yep.
and dancing and sex. And I like some of the obscure ones too, like Somebody's Watching You, which is my alarm on my phone. My ringtone is Hollywood
You
Swinging
wake up to
because
that?
we're in here.
Of course.
But my alarm is Somebody's Watching You by Sly and the Family Stone.
That's
I love
good.
Running Away.
Uh-huh.
And what's the other one that Jennifer always plays? Oh, Jennifer loved Running Away, but I love Family Affair.
Mhm.
And if you want me to stay, some of the later weirder stuff,
I mean, that was the dawn of using a drum machine too.
right? I just think his voice he's just everything to me. They're the most exciting. They're the most fun. They're the funkiest.
Yeah.
Janet Jackson would never have had the giant hit that she had without Sly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Greg Errico, man. So Cynthia passed a couple years ago. Sly's still around.
He is
Sly's
still around. He was our 100th episode.
Oh my God, that's fantastic. What a
Yeah.
great
And
looking-
man, we were so lucky because
So
he doesn't
lucky.
talk to anybody.
Yeah. And he only has so much time in him too before his brain kind of disappears. So
Yeah.
we got about literally 22 useful minutes out of but what we did is we didn't talk about all of the problems. We celebrated who he was and his impact on particularly Bay Area music. And it's just such a fantastic show. It's great.
Yeah.
You talked to Sly?
Yeah. And
Oh
then,
my God.
so we didn't have an hour worth of material with Sly, but what we did was we went out to a bunch of Bay Area musicians and said, what was Sly to you? And so we would talk, and we cut it such that we would talk to Sly, and then he would say something, and then we would bring on Johnny Cola from Huey Lewis and the News, and he would say,
Right.
here's what happened with me and Sly.
Yeah.
Or we would bring on Dave Agent from Sacramento, and he would say, here's why Sly was so important. And that ended up being the fun part. It was a lot of editing work, but
Yeah.
it was all worth it. The other thing about that entire movement was that it was so uniquely Bay Area, and it gave us, there's a lot of, when you're talking about local acts, there's a lot to be proud of. And specifically being a drummer and having Greg Errico on, there's a funk secret handshake for me. Whenever somebody talks about how much they love the funk, I just sort of sideways whisper Betty Davis. And most people have never heard the Betty Davis records, but he produced the very first Betty Davis record. Betty Davis was a funk singer who was married to, her name was Betty something else, but she married Miles Davis for about 6 months, and she just kept Davis. But her records were so doggone funky, so funky. Yeah. And so, a lot of times I'll just throw it out there and
and see if they know.
And see who gets excited. I want to acknowledge Jennifer, though, because, you're the smartest man in the world with the Smartest Man in the World podcast that everybody should subscribe to. But the old saying, behind every smartest man in the world, there's the smartest woman in the world who can go toe to toe.
She's much smarter than I am, and her taste in music is just superb. This virus has devastated a lot of older jazz musicians because it's really a disease that affects people of color really heavily. Mm-hmm. And so a bunch of cats have died in the last month, including Wynton Marsalis's dad, Ellis, who was a brilliant pianist, and Henry Grimes, and I mean, some of them were really, really old, but they might not have died so soon if this hadn't happened. In any case, she stays on top of this and really goes deep dive into their music. And we have long discussions where I just learn everything about it from her. And of course, Little Richard's a particular favorite of hers and always was. You know, he's so, yeah, I thank you for saying that because we do the podcast together now mostly. Because what else can we do?
Yeah,
right.
I've had a lot of operations in the last year that I couldn't get out as much to do the podcast live. And I think having Jennifer come on as, you know, as a full-fledged podcaster, as opposed to just telling me, you know, setting the agenda with me. The show was always her, you know, baby.
Yeah.
Because the agenda of history, feminism, music, drugs, art, and all that is driven by her. But I've loved having her be on every week because it's so much fun. We just sit here and play record. Basically, now it's turned into kind of a house party where we play records,
listening
talk
party,
about jazz. Yeah, yeah.
Did you guys get into the passing of Fabian Schneider from Kraftwerk at all yet?
Yeah, we did an episode 2 weeks ago. See, Jennifer's an expert on electronica, and so we played Kraftwerk and. Also,
without David Bowie,
right? Also, another a gay star from Europe who had a Spanish name who was in a techno band. He passed away too. So, and what's his name from the Stranglers also passed away. So that was a very new wave electronica episode. And you know, when you talk about electronica, it leads you right to house. And the symbiosis between house and electronica, and then that leads you to techno and dance, and then that leads you to trap and, you know,
drum and bass,
yeah, all of it's such
it's intertwined.
It had to start somewhere, and it started in the late 60s, early 70s in Detroit and Germany.
Yeah,
you know?
simultaneously.
Right, when I lived in England in the 90s, you know, there was all these bands like Oasis and shit like that, but the biggest music was house.
Yeah,
like. You know, that's what people just fucking went crazy. They had giant gatherings and everybody takes, you know, ecstasy and whatnot. And I think when they started it, I think they had no idea that house would become like the world's most popular music for a while, you know?
Really, if you start a movement that becomes the world's most popular music, it's organically such that you shouldn't know it. If you knew it, it's not, right? It's not going to catch on. So
no, I think they were doing what they wanted to do, and I think Kraftwerk had a superb sense of humor. The album covers and the way they presented themselves, and I'm friends with a cat named Nick Franklin, and Nick Franklin was in an outfit called Lemon Jelly, and they're like an ambient disco, you know, techno kind of feel. He's worked with lots of different artists, like John Cale, who's post Velvet Underground stuff has been everything from symphonies to, you know, giant pieces to rock, and he's really eclectic. And Nick's music's really, if you've never heard of it, you could spin Lemon Jelly. It's also very fanciful and kind of humorous. John Cale we saw several years ago at the Brooklyn Academy of Music, 2 nights. Jennifer's a huge fan of his, and one night we went, and it was a tribute to Nico, who was the singer with the Velvet Underground.
Yeah.
It was sort of a German chanteuse. She sang like this, you know, sort of other people's parties, you know. And they had all these hip acts come on and sing her songs. And John Cale was kind of the musical director, right? So they had, I'm blanking on her name, Sonic Youth, the bass player from Sonic Youth. Anyway, she was there, and Alice the Policewoman, and Peaches. You've heard of Peaches, and Peaches speaks German, so she sang in German, which was really impressive. And I met Peaches later at a Lucha Vavoom thing down here in LA, which is Mexican wrestling and burlesque. And Peaches is about 3 feet tall and absolutely fearless. She got on this goddamn rig, and it's in a proper boxing rig, you know, right? Like they've set up a giant boxing ring, and they have you know, midgets and drag queens, and it's really fun. In between the wrestling matches, and
we got to go to that, Pete.
It's in between the wrestling matches, they have burlesque. So some of the burlesque are women, some is men. And fucking Pete just got in this rig, and they hoisted her above this boxing ring, like 75 feet in the sky, in the gods, right? And then she came down singing, and I was like, "You're out of your fucking mind." She didn't have a harness on, like, just. And I said to her though, and she was wearing this insane outfit and her hair straight up and everything. I go, "I saw you at the Brooklyn Academy at the Nico tribute." She's like, "Oh my god," because that's like that's pretty arty,
Yeah.
Arty, the Brooklyn Academy of Music. You definitely have a glass of wine, and it's a proper music thing, like not a rock and roll club. But that's the beauty of Peaches, is that not only is she the dirtiest songwriter in the world, she could hip it up and sing a couple Nico songs in German while playing a harmonium. Right?
Wow.
So it was eclectic, to say the least. And John Cale's just a superb artist, completely in control. And, a decided symphonic feel the second night. He played a thing he'd written called Paris 1919, and then a bunch of other material. So cut to, we're in Wales a couple years ago for a book festival, and we went to, not Swansea, Cardiff. Cardiff's the capital of Wales. Mm-hmm. And John Cale is Welsh. There's about 5 famous Welsh people. Tom Jones.
Yeah. That's it for me. That's all I got.
Yeah. And
Bob Welch,
Shirley
the pitcher from the Dodgers. Bob Welch. No.
Mm-hmm. Shirley Bassey's Welsh.
Okay.
Anthony Hopkins is Welsh.
Oh, okay.
The actor Michael Sheen is Welsh. And Michael Sheen played David Frost in the Frost Nixon movie.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
He was in that HBO thing about the Kinsey report and everything. And Charlotte Church, who was a teenage singer, who was famous when she was like 13. She's Welsh. Hey, we went to this concert in Wales, and we went backstage after, and Charlotte Church sang in the show with John Cale, and Michael Sheen got up and did a poem to his music. Like he recited Dylan Thomas, who's another famous Welsh person. So it was like every famous Welsh person in one room.
Right.
Charlotte Church was wearing glitter and had no shoes on. And I said, "Do you live in London?" And she went, "Fuck no, I live in Cardiff, mate."
Right on. Way to represent.
She stayed in Wales, and she is a big activist, like a real political person. And as you know, politics in England, like here, have taken a decided downturn the last few years.
Yeah.
And the point of the story is I met her when she was 13 in 1997 because I was asked to do stand-up at Prince Charles's 50th birthday party.
Holy
No
cow.
kidding.
So it was me, a couple other comedians. Tommy Tiernan was one, who's an Irish cat who I know for a long time. And Ginger Spice sang Happy Birthday.
Okay.
Joan Collins was there. Robbie Williams did a number, and they got the guy who used to play Q in the Bond films, Desmond Llewellyn. The old, the one who did.
I love all of these people. This is a great lineup.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Elle Macpherson. I was in a dressing room with Rowan Atkinson, Stephen Fry, Mel Smith, Vinnie Jones, the footballer, Griff Rhys-Jones, the comedian, also Welsh, and they were smoking and drinking, and it was great. And Vinnie Jones came in, and Vinnie Jones was in like a bunch of gangster movies in the early 2000s, right, and 90s. He had been a footballer, so he's a big cat with a flat nose. He's been famous for biting a dude's ear almost off in a match, right? So fantastically, my wife showed up later in the day. We've been rehearsing all day, and Peter Ustinov was there.
Wow.
who played the Roman Emperor Nero in the movie Quo Vadis in like 1950. You know what I mean? It was crazy. And it was a really fun day.
What a disparate crew. Holy cow.
Right?
Robbie Williams to Peter Ustinov.
Robbie Williams. Yeah. And Ginger Spice went, "Happy birthday, Prince Charles." Right. Like she was in like a Maryland outfit.
Yeah. How topical.
And
good job, Jay.
Right. I did not bow, by the way.
Oh.
because I'm American.
That's right.
I have to bow.
You don't have to
they
bow.
all
You're a
bowed
Yank. Sure.
to the royal box, and I
Gave the nod. What's up?
yeah. So you're not going to believe this. The rest of this, Roger Moore
What?
is there. Yes, George Martin.
Wow.
Those two don't surprise me, but just
Right?
the
George Martin had made Charlotte Church's first record. She was a teenage phenomenon.
man.
She was 13. So he was there with Charlotte Church. And he
way to
came
tie
up
it all
me,
up, by the way.
Right?
Yeah.
He came up to me and he goes, "Hello, I'm George."
Yeah.
And I'm like,
No shit.
Yeah.
yeah. So I walked up to Roger Moore and went, "Hi, Roger Moore, I'm Greg." And he went, and just gave me nothing, right?
Oh.
Yeah, he totally gave me the frosty paw.
Oh.
So at the end
Whatever.
of the show,
He's my least favorite James Bond anyway.
right? Well, yeah.
He is
At
now.
the end of this, George Lazenby.
Yeah,
At
that's
end
the
of
one.
show, although Roger Moore was, when Audrey Hepburn, before she died, she was like this major spokesman for UNICEF, right? She went around the world,
Yeah.
looked after starving children, tried to drum up money for charity. She was really a beautiful person that way. And she was mates with Roger Moore. And before she died, she said, "Roger, would you take over my position?" So he had to.
Mhm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He couldn't just go, "Oh, no, Roger, I don't want to do that." He, of course,
You
not,
don't
I'll
say
do it. And
you
then,
don't say no.
He-
So he
he knocked
became
it
the
back.
spokesperson of UNESCO.
yeah, he worked for UNICEF for years.
or
And,
UNICEF.
So at the end of the show, we all lined up and the prince came on stage. And this was with his first year with his new wife. Camilla, thank you. Camilla Parker Bowles. She was there. In fact, it might have been the first public outing where they were both together.
Wow.
And so he came up to everybody and shook their hand. I was behind Joan Collins and I could have grabbed her. She was tiny and perfectly formed. And Prince Charles got to me, and his people skills, because
He's a
all
polished
he's ever
prince.
done
Yeah.
is be, suave with people. So he wasn't that tall, 5'9", 5'10". He took my hand like that and pulled me in and went, "Did you come here just for this? Thank you so much. Did you come here just for this?" And I went, I did. And he went, and I thought like he was going to ask me to go back with him.
Yeah.
Because it was so intimate the way
Yeah.
he said it. He went, where are you staying? And I went, "I'm staying with friend house." Like,
At the Westin?
I thought, yeah, right. That's how he does it though. Like when you're talking to him, his focus, right?
Yeah.
It was.
You're the
it
most
was
important
amazing.
person there for that moment.
I've never met anyone else who was able to do that with every single person he spoke to. And
What a
very, very
great
often-
thing to be good at, though.
right?
Yeah.
Just
Oh,
pure
man.
personality. Like when Nelson Mandela was released from prison and he came to London. If you've ever been to London, in Trafalgar Square, there's the giant pillars and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
But on each side of the square is all the places that speak to Britain's hideous empire, right? Australia House, Oceania House, all their colonies, right? And then on one side of the square, South Africa House. And in front of South Africa House, for 1 million years, for the whole time Nelson Mandela was incarcerated, there was a vigil, right? A vigil for Nelson Mandela. And so when he finally came to London, the vigil stopped, and Jennifer went to see him walk through the square, and he walked down the Pall Mall, and the streets were lined with people, millions of people, black people, white people, people from America, everybody. Charles was with him, was with Nelson Mandela, and Charles completely stepped back and let Nelson Mandela go right out in front. And Nelson Mandela was 6'7". He was giant.
Wow.
I didn't know that.
Went into the crowd and was shaking hands with people, and people were, and he was dancing. And I didn't get to see that one, but Jennifer saw it, and she said, one, that Nelson Mandela was amazing and unbelievably charismatic and tall, quite old by the time he got let out of prison.
Right.
Yeah.
But that Charles couldn't have been more, happy to stay out of the spotlight, let the other person have the day. Something that we don't see much anymore from leaders.
No
Boy.
kidding. His
That's a
job
gracious
since he was a little kid was to be that gracious and to be the best example of behavior.
He
You're
may never
right.
be king.
It's tough. I miss that so much. that
Yeah.
amount of poise in our leadership.
Well, watching Obama last week on TV was pretty emotional.
Yeah.
I started crying. I've never seen him speak in person, but I watched him on TV, of course.
Uh-huh.
But the greatest speakers I've
He's
ever
pretty
seen.
good at it.
Oh my God, he's good on the stump.
Yeah.
And also, the exact opposite of now.
Yep.
When the press would ask him a question, he didn't answer right away. He'd think about it.
He'd think about
You
it.
could see him. He'd think. Then he'd give a measured, judicious, calm, adult, reasoned response with no rancor. He never yelled at anyone. He never called a reporter a pig or anything. I've seen Bill Clinton speak. I've seen Hillary Clinton speak. Jesse Jackson was galvanizing. When he ran for president, he came to San Francisco this was the second time in '88. And it was at Fillmore and Webster, right?
Mm-hmm.
That little park there. And Willie Brown was his campaign manager. And Jesse Jackson was in full declamatory mode, right? He was just whipping the crowd into a frenzy because his slogan, as you recall, was "Keep Hope Alive." Because we were in the middle of the Reagan Bush years, and it was just like now, a complete shit show. And Willie Brown got up, came late to the event, and walked up on the stage in the middle of the speech. And Jesse Jackson stopped, and they gave each other high fives, and they hugged, and they snugged. And then he went and sat down behind him. And Jesse Jackson went, "I can stop in the middle of my speech to say hello to my campaign manager, unlike Dan Quayle." Because I know where I am and what I'm talking about.
Right. He can't stop to write a word on a chalkboard.
Right. He picked it up right from where he left off. I also saw Geraldine Ferraro speak in 1984 when she was running for vice president.
Yeah. So let's talk about your top 3 or 4 or 5, because your oratory skills are evident. For people who don't listen to the Smartest Man in the World podcast, you should. That's where you'll see them, especially if you go back to episodes that you've done live in a room on the road where it's just you and a microphone and a little bit of reaction, and you're playing off of the reaction. But it's not like you're there doing crowd work. It's different. You have the ability to captivate an audience and then to take them for a ride. And I love the way you double down on something, even if it's just a little minuscule thing, even if you misspeak. Is this a calculated, measured thing for you where you just go down the rabbit hole? If you're going to trip and fall, just go down the rabbit hole. Come with me, everybody. Is that a technique?
Hey, this is Pete A. Turner from Lions Rock Productions. We create podcasts around here. And if you, your brand, or your company want to figure out how to do a podcast, just talk to me. I'll give you the advice on the right gear, the best plan, and show you how to take a podcast that makes sense for you, that's sustainable, that's scalable, and fun. Hit me up at pete@breakitdownshow.com. Let me help. I want to hear about it.
If you're going to trip and fall, just go down the rabbit hole. Come with me, everybody. Is that a technique?
Thank you for asking that. It was completely organic. When we started doing it, and it's been 10 years now, or it will be 10 years in the autumn, I didn't know what I was going to do. And we did the first live show over a little place in West Hollywood called Bar Lubitsch. And I got up and started spieling, right? And after the first show, Jennifer went, "This is what you need to be doing, because this is the strongest, medium for you." When I agreed with her, because it's always important to take good advice. So I found that when I was speaking, I would make mistakes. And rather than try to correct them or edit them out, I would just repeat the mistake and then keep going down it, like you say, and then trying to deconstruct it and make something out of it.
Yeah.
And that became a technique. Then I was able to follow that. My 2 favorite quotes are, what does Leonard Cohen say? "Forget your perfect world. Cracks are where the light shines through."
Yeah.
Right? You make something, you want it to be perfect. Part of all of our problem, you're a musician, part of all of our problem is you want it to be a perfect thing, like a Ming vase. And it isn't. Performing has mistakes. Writing has mistakes. A book has everything, And I think you have to embrace that. In my opinion, what I do, that's how I do it. Mm-hmm. You're walking down a road backwards. You're falling into a hole. You're trying to. I saw Ornette Coleman with Jennifer years ago at UCLA, and Ornette Coleman played free jazz.
Right.
So I don't know that it was composition as much as collaboration and improvisation. He came out with his son on drums, 3 bass players. You would love this configuration, man.
Yeah.
His son on drums, 3 bass players, one on electric, one on stand-up, one on another kind of bass. And he came out, I don't know if you know Ornette Coleman, but he played this tiny plastic saxophone. That was this little white affair. And he came out like this. And I thought, oh my, are you okay? Sat down and they just started to go. And it wasn't melodious. It wasn't harmonious. And it wasn't, it was you know what I mean? I don't know how to describe for each.
It was like a Jackson Pollock.
Yeah, it was just, but the vibration of it and the majesty of what was going on and the immensity of the groove, because it wasn't a groove like a funky groove at all. It was defying jazz, but you know, like all of the free jazz artists were taking what they perceived as, you know, the tyranny of having to play, you know, standard
structure
and the structure, exactly. So, but within the music and without the structure, it became exultant. And at the end of the first number, which was this 3 basses and him blatting away on this little plastic sax and the drummer drumming like mad, at the end of the first number, the whole place went, and then started applauding. Yeah. But there was this, like 3,000 people in Royce Hall, a sharp intake of breath. Like you couldn't believe it. There was this release. And I remember after reading an interview with Ornette Coleman, and someone asked him, what are you trying to do on stage? And he said, teach. Which I thought was like, I saw Sonny Rollins there, and Sonny Rollins was in an Afro-Cuban bag that night. And by the end of the night, everybody was dancing. A jazz concert, right? Because it was just, you know, and I saw Keith, who's the piano player with the huge ego.
Oh boy.
Keith Jarrett.
Keith Jarrett,
yeah. Jarrett. Yeah. And Keith Jarrett's a magnificent musician. He's a classical musician. On stage, he's an asshole. You know, like he's really an asshole. Like he had no personality. It was awful. It was right after 9/11, and he goes, yeah, we came from New York. We could never fucking get back there. And you're like, dude, we're all trying to not think about it. It was like 3 days after 9/11.
Oh, wow, yeah.
The country completely traumatized, and he's acting like a dick. So all these different people bring all these different things to it. Like Sonny Rollins gave an article in the New York Times the other day, he's still alive, where he's talking about the immortality of music and how basically he's saying like Bach and Beethoven existed before they wrote their music, that music is this collective unconscious and that you're trying to improvise off the top of it. It was really profound. If you get a chance, go back and look up Sonny Rollins a few days ago from the New York Times. The foreign papers have it free, then you don't have to go through the paywall at the New York Times. But the reason I'm bringing up those people is I try to look at the comedy like that.
So are you more of a Sonny Rollins?
Sorry?
Because Sonny Rollins is more, you know, he's groovy. He taps into that groove more than Ornette Coleman, who is just completely free. Yeah. Where do you sit, you think, on the spectrum?
I'd like to say somewhere in between. I believe that a small amount of structure allows you a jumping off point. So that's why I always had notes and a place to start with the podcast. Like, okay. And then I also believe that letting yourself go and letting your ego go makes you funnier. On stage when I'm doing stand-up, I browbeat the audience into submission. I accept no heckling. I accept no dissent.
Yeah.
If you have a different opinion than me, I don't care about it because I have the mic.
Yep. People didn't come to see that. They didn't come to see that opinion. Right? They came to see yours.
Yeah. As I say, you're entitled to my opinion. And,
you pay good money for it.
Right. This isn't a theory. This is the fact I thought of.
Yeah.
So I was listening to the last album I recorded back, which hasn't come out yet because I'm being inconceivably lazy and lockdown. And someone tries to come test me on something at one point, and I just mercilessly berate them into the ground. But I would never do any of that at the podcast. There's only one episode of the podcast where a drunk asshole came and started to try to heckle me. And I shot him down pretty hard. But I also did it by going, you're really exposing yourself right now. You're really vulnerable. You're being very childish, and you're trying to make this about this and that. And I can see where all your pain is. And he, you know, because I didn't go, hey, you fucking nipple prick bug fucker, all fucking, you know, I didn't do any of that abusive stuff. I just turned it around on him, and I went, I can see you've got a real issue, you know. And he shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden it's about your problem, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I like to think when we could do it live, people bring me gifts, and I have so many books and records and pieces of art and paintings and poetry and drugs and alcohol and that people gave me.
Nice work if you can get it.
Right? The generosity of spirit of the audience is the most beautiful thing. Your music, like I said, you guys know this. Connecting with the audience is what it's all supposed to be about. Mm-hmm. Whether you're Ornette Coleman or Deborah Harry or Sonny Rollins. And a lot of times I'd have a bunch of stuff planned to talk about, and then someone would give me a book or a pack of baseball cards or something, and I'd go off. I'd just pick up the book or the cards, and that would lead me to another thing. That would lead me to another thing. That would lead me to another thing. And I never, I sometimes got back to the point and sometimes not. And so that's how I look at it. I want to, you know how like a hummingbird goes backwards and forwards and flies up and down? But a butterfly flies sort of like you don't know where it's going to go.
Yeah.
I think the butterfly is the one who
got it dialed in. Well, somebody gives you a piece of artwork or something, and then you go off on a story. They will have that the rest of their lives. So I will counter by saying for everything that somebody's given you, you have given them some gem that they'll take with them that will make them interesting for the rest of whomever they run into.
That's very, very sweet of you. I really appreciate that. I'm doing a podcast live, like we are doing one on the 30th, on a thing called the Nowhere Comedy Club. You can look it up, or you can go to my website, gregproops.com. And it's been a savior, I think, for a lot of us. This club, Steve Hofstetter and Ben Glee put it together. And you can watch comics perform live at home on your telephone or your computer. And you can be seen as well. We can see you, which makes it perfectly interactive. You can hear the laughter.
Yeah, that's everything.
You hear people's dogs bark. And people perform at home, like holding it. Hi, how are you? Like holding it. I used a hairbrush and a spatula, a spoon. They can drink at their own house, and you play live to them. And so I've done a couple shows. I did a stand-up show, and then I did an improv show with Glebe. Glebe and I just riffed. And then we did some Who's Line games. And so I'm doing the podcast at the end of the month. And I'm thinking about going into the vast storehouse of stuff people have given me over the years.
Yeah. And
just showing it to people, because I think I have paintings of Satchel Paige. I have a beautiful engraving of Sean Connery and Michael Caine from The Man Who Would Be King that a guy did for me. I have a ring a guy made out of a quarter from the year I was born, 1873. I can't tell you how profound it is to me, the things people give me. And I think some of the handmade things I was thinking about, now you've convinced me to show them, because I don't know that they've gotten a visual airing. No one's ever seen anything, because it's always been a podcast, but now you'll be able to see it. So anyway, that was a long way of saying that I appreciate everyone who listens to my show. And I think I am going to bring out a couple of the tchotchkes, because they're pretty amazing.
Please do.
Someone made a little car and put a Kittens McTavish in it. We have a mascot called Kittens McTavish on the show. I have 1,000 different Kittens McTavishes, and we also have another thing on the show called the elusive ephemeral emotional support Moonjack, which I didn't make up any of these things. I improvised them on the night, and they became part of the whole show, and people remember them. And that's the beauty of doing it organically. There was a weird barking noise one night at a venue we were playing, what used to be the UCB over on, so I'm pointing this way to orient you, on and in the middle of the show, I heard, whoop, whoop. No one knows what it was. I think it was someone pushing their chair back, and it scraped on the floor. And I said, do you guys hear that? It's the elusive, ephemeral, emotional support Moonjack. A Moonjack is a tiny deer that barks. And somehow that caught on with everybody. So I have paintings of Moonjacks. People send me Moonjack dolls. I have a woven Moonjack.
Yeah.
I have an embroidery, because the Moonjack slogan is based on a thing a friend of ours gave Jennifer years ago. I support you in everything you do. So improvising all those things has led to a lot of stuff. People embrace it, and then you've gotten through to them.
Yeah, and they spend time making those gifts.
I'm sure Greg Errico or Rick Stevens would say to you that the most profound thing is knowing how much the audience is there for you. Quentin Crisp was a very outspoken and flamboyant gay man from England, and he was out way before anyone was out. And he there was a movie about his life called The Naked Civil Servant with John Hurt playing him, and he was very funny, and he was an astute social critic as well as being a wit and whatnot. And he said two things that I've never forgotten. One of which was, you know how you have friends and they go, yeah, I'm gonna start a band, man, or I'm gonna write a book or whatever, and they never, they're never gonna do it.
Yeah.
And they keep telling everybody they're one thing and they're another thing. Quentin Crisp said, you can't be a pig farmer for 30 years and tell everyone you're a violinist. And which puts an end to it. Because I you get people who come up to you and go, man, I've done stand-up a couple times, but I don't know how you guys do it. And you're like, I don't know why you're telling me this. I didn't tell you about all my unsuccessful attempts to be an airline pilot or whatever.
Right.
And then the other thing is Marlene Dietrich, when she was older and wasn't in pictures as much, took her act on the road and did a cabaret act, right, with a piano player, and she sang songs. And you remember Marlene Dietrich's voice. She also sang like Nico. And she wore like a full bodysuit under her suit to keep her in,
Stuff together,
and, she did the old-fashioned facelift, which was you take your hair and you tie it back as hard as humanly possible so that your skin is taut, and then you put your wig over that.
Wow.
And then she talked about old times and Gary Cooper, and she'd sing a song and she'd smoke a cigarette and then talk about this movie, that movie. And Quentin Crisp said her show wasn't about the singing and the stories. It was about applause. He said, when she came on, the place would go bananas. And when she left, the place would go bananas. And she let that happen. She, you see, I used to be a little more brusque on stage and leave right away after a stand-up set, because I remember Elvis Costello, when I saw him in like 1978, they didn't even take a bow, they ran off. And I've changed my mind entirely about that now. And I believe that you have to let that love exist. You have to let them let it. And by doing that, you're doing them a favor. Like, you see someone in person, like Robin Williams is the closest I can think of. Robin was a shy guy, and people would go bananas just being around him. Just the idea of him in the building was enough to drive audiences absolutely over the brink. And he had that beautiful capacity to accept it, and Sean Connery, who I've met very briefly, and I had lunch with him once, and a bunch of people. I wasn't the only one. And Jennifer's seen him.
We didn't need to know that detail.
Right. Jennifer's seen him in Scotland, right? He's from Edinburgh, where he drove a milk float, which is a milk wagon, in the 50s, before he was a bodybuilder and a male model, and then he became an actor.
And
Sean
a better
Connery,
James Bond than previously mentioned guy.
Sean Connery, believe it or not, has a brother that looks almost exactly like him. And this was 15, 20 years ago at the film festival in Scotland. I had a gig, of course, but Jennifer went to see The Man Who Would Be King with Sean Connery and Michael Caine. And Michael Caine got up first, and the Scottish people gave him a very, very, nice round of applause. And then Michael Caine said, and now, ladies and gentlemen, the President of Scotland. And Jennifer said Sean Connery stood there, and the audience jumped up and applauded for 10 minutes, right? Screaming, crying, tearing their hair out, screaming for him. And he stood there like this.
And
at the end of it, he went, it was nothing.
Yes. That's why he's the best James Bond.
He has that charisma.
That is terrific.
I went to see my friend Mike McShane played Friar Tuck in Kevin Costner's Robin Hood, and Sean Connery came to the set one day and shot the part of King Richard. So I was lucky enough to eat lunch with them. At the end of the day, McShane turns to Sean Connery and goes, "Mr. Connery, it was a real pleasure working with you." And Sean Connery was still in the King outfit, turned to me and Mike and went, "Oh, bye-bye." And we were high-fiving each other and humping each other the whole way home. Like humping each other. Sean Connery was electric in person.
Wow.
6'3". Yes, Kevin, what was the name of that second AD on the Untouchables? He had it. David Bowie, I think, to some extent. Prince.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Aretha Franklin. You know, the magic of some stars isn't even if that they're talented or that they're perfect or anything. They're imperfect, but they let you love them.
Yep.
It's so key. It's so key. Like with Sly, I don't know, you know. I think Sly had that capacity for a really long time, and then he didn't want it anymore, or something changed in him, or they all turned, right?
Yeah, there's.
I think that's what changed. I think that's what changed.
Yeah, he might be. I mean, I think if he was a young kid today, he'd be on the spectrum. You know, they'd try to understand what was going on because he doesn't want that attention. He's
not anymore.
No.
But think of him from like 1967 to like 1975 or whatever.
Yeah.
When he was the center of the show, and he got married at Madison Square Garden. I mean, he had the capacity to let the world in on his most intimate shit for a really long time. And he's so offhand on talk shows.
Well, before he was Sly Stone, you know, the singer and the leader of Sly and the Family Stone, he was Sly Stone, the DJ at KSOL.
Yeah, man.
So,
you know, DJ.
and he led shows and, you know, emceed things. And so, yeah, he did have the capacity to be loved at one point. And I really think that's kind of what changed, what clicked over for him. So, hey, we've had you for greater than an hour, and we really appreciate you doing this with us. And we could do it all day, but what I would like to say before you go, oh, I'm late for something, I got to go. Will you please put some love on Jennifer for us? And
I will.
There's two things that I want to say, and then I'll let Pete close up. But first, anytime that you like to both do the show, that would be amazing fun.
Oh, awesome.
So you have an open invitation. And then I'm going to get your number, and I'm going to call you twice a year just to say hi and tell you how much I love you.
All right, baby.
Okay.
And I love you guys. Thank you so much. It was a real pleasure today, just like last time.
Yeah, thank you so much.
We'll do it again.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, darlings.